Hey, friend.
Hey girl, hey.
So good to see you.
Good to see you. How are you feeling today?
I'm kind of tickled actually about
Ooh,
something.
okay.
So, you know that I'm teaching this semester, right?
Yes.
And I just updated my resume on LinkedIn and brings all the boys to the yard.
Oh, come on. Resume
All
bringing
my
out the
ex
boys
boy
to the
so
yard.
big age stuff. Apparently all the ex-boyfriends come out on LinkedIn.
I love this. I love that your ex-boyfriends are on LinkedIn. All of mine are incarcerated.
That's not true.
Shit, they should be.
Well, maybe mine should be too.
Well, congratulations, friend.
Thank
I'm
you.
happy.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been fun teaching again.
I like that. I like that. I
It's
love
a
that.
funny it's funny because 'cause I'm, in this very unique, I think, pretty unique position where I'm teaching a course and taking a course this fall on the same platform.
Oh, really?
Canvas, it's the new Blackboard.
Okay, we have to talk about this.
Yeah. So it's fun. Like, on one of my Gmails, I log on to my class as a student, and on one, I log on as a professor. It's cool. Anyway, how are you?
I am feeling a little gassy. It's a little gas. Yeah, big age. Big age. It's real. I'm feeling a little gassy. I'm having a bit of an IBS situation over here. It started on Friday when I was on the train on the way to get my Birkin. And I
Mm.
said, this is how the devil shows up in your life. You know, a moment that's so special was marred by trapped gas. But I didn't let it get me down. I picked up some gas X as soon as I touched down, and we've just been gentle all weekend trying to let this phase subside. I'll be happy when you are done with your class so you can give me some advice on my nutrition and how to manage this.
I have some ideas.
Okay,
I'll DM you.
thanks.
Okay, so today we are talking about something that is, I think, touches almost all of us,
Absolutely.
whether we know it or not, and it's something that I think we should delve into more over the next year, because no matter what, it's going to be present in our lives, and that's disinformation and misinformation that we get through different sources, but presumably from sources that we trust or we
Yeah.
think are sharing information that is helpful for something that we are interested in. So you are the resident expert on social media, but I know that the For You tab on TikTok really does curate quite a bit of information. I know on Instagram as well. And it is very scary kind of how quickly this can spin for people who aren't even particularly invested in different things.
Whew, so many examples just to give, but let me start off by saying that I am someone who believed was adjacent to quite a few conspiracy theories, as people know. Grassroots organizer background. When I first came to DC, I was definitely in the community and in a bit of like a Black nationalist. I now use the term Hotep community. And I think to myself how some of the conspiracy theories that I either heard or maybe even was like, maybe that's true, right? How they were contained at that time because this was pre social media, pre TikTok, pre Instagram. I think what would my life have been like if I was a part of that world today? And quite frankly, it scares me. It scares me how I might have been indoctrinated or the people I might have indoctrinated. And I'm also thinking about friend American Radical and the podcast that chronicles how this young woman who was virtually apolitical and very critical of Donald Trump ended up fast forward like falling into this rabbit hole her family thinks on Facebook, showing up to the Capitol on January 6th and actually dying. One of the protesters, the insurrectionists, whatever word you want to use, who died on that day. And this had all happened within the course of maybe a year or two, where she goes from not caring a whole lot to being an insurrectionist. Disinformation.
I just keep thinking about that, but then think about all the microwaves, not microwaves, the microwaves. It trickles into all of our lives.
What do you mean?
That, it could be something as big as being red pilled,
Yeah.
um, for sure. Like, that's an extreme, but I think about more complicated, nuanced issues and the information that we read about it
I see what you're
and
saying.
how that can swing people one way or the other with not maybe intending that to be.
So let's get into it because we have some examples today, right, that we want to share with people around things that they may have heard about, maybe even heard their family members speaking on that are examples of this. But first, I think it's important to lay out kind of the difference between dis and misinformation. Disinformation actually has an incentive, right? There is some interest behind actually spewing the lie. Misinformation may be a topic that is a falsehood or that is based in a lie, but people are sharing it, not necessarily realizing that that is what they are doing. Versus
That's my understanding as well.
versus disinformation actually has a malactor, like a bad actor behind it, wanting to persuade people and to influence people into this false belief. Again, for larger gain, maybe it's political, maybe it's financial, but there is some aim to it at the end. And as a matter of fact, we know that Russia has been accused of being one of the biggest proponents in the United States around disinformation. And there was just a federal indictment on this, right?
Oh, yeah. And I mean, there have been multiple times, even with us, right, who read multiple sources over the last 6 months where we'll share articles and one of us will say, I don't think that's real.
Yeah, yeah. Like I've screenshotted for you a comment that someone has stated on social media, and you'll be like, I think that's a Russian bot. And then I take a step back and I'm like, you right. Because how we are taught in this country to privilege, especially the written word. And so when you start to manipulate that, even for folks who are on alert to disinformation, it gets really murky really fast.
It gets really murky really fast. And who gets to decide? And I think we don't have the answer to that. No one has the answer to that. But I think this is going to be the existential question of the next 25 years. How
Period.
are we ever going to know what is influenced and what is not? Think about even yesterday. So we're filming this on Monday, October 28th. What happened yesterday?
With the rally?
No, oh, well, that, but with the Washington Post
Oh, girl.
or the
So
LA Times too.
So we know that much of MAGA Republicans' ire has been around false news, and they have worked since their inception to attempt to undermine independent media sources, right? Claiming that all of our media is being manipulated. It's Orwellian, and we use that word a lot on the podcast. I think they would be happy if every media source that we reviewed in this country was Fox News. They want to be able to manipulate the news around their narrative. And if people are not bedfellows with MAGA Republicans and with Donald Trump specifically, then he has a lot of negative things to say about them, which is why for years, not just during a Trump presidency or MAGA Republicans, publications will endorse a candidate. Right now, the time is even more important that this happens because our media institutions in this country are under attack. Yet, the Washington Post, the Jeff Bezos owned Washington Post, decided not to endorse a candidate.
First of all, when did Jeff Bezos buy the Washington Post?
Girl, that was my question when we talked this morning. I was like, he owned the damn Whole Foods, Amazon. I don't know that I
My
can.
doctor he owns.
I don't know that I can breathe air. At this point, Amazon owns the air. Amazon. So in 2013, he purchased the Washington Post. And I just think no one man should have all that power. Clearly, billionaires should also not exist because of their ability to influence so much of what we do, what we eat, what we drink, shit, how we think at this point. And so the New York Times, I saw their huge spread talking about the importance of independent media, of independent critical thought, calling out all of just the heinous things that Donald Trump has said and had his followers to believe since he rose to prominence around the presidency.
Probably like in this time of polarization. Like if I were like his PR person, right? In this time of polarization, the Washington Post is an independent news source that isn't aligning with any political candidate because all they're committed to is the free press.
You sound really good at this. Well, I think we have our suspicions, and I would imagine it's something about the election, the polls being very, very close right now, and he don't want to do nothing to make Trump and Vance upset, to upset MAGA Republicans because we live in a corporatocracy, and they are towing the line, if not have crossed the line of a monopoly, right? With the many, many things that he owns and the way he's able to control commerce in this country and abroad. And so he wants to make sure he is on the good side of whoever the next presidential administration will be. And so that for that reason, what that means, I think, for today's conversation is what the Post has implicitly given a nod to is we're okay with the disinformation. Go ahead and keep the party going. Go ahead and keep the party going. Despite what just happened in North Carolina around the hurricanes. Yeah. Hurricanes, North Carolina, Florida, Hurricanes Milton and Hurricane Helene, and how much disinformation was coming out around that. Specifically, and what has been called out is Russia, because what they want to do before the election, and people, please hear this closely. We're not talking about a science fiction movie. This is the year 2024 of our Lord AD. In this time right now, the way that Russia wants for the current administration to be seen as corrupt and inept. And so many lies were being spewed right, about the administration's response to these natural disasters. Down to MTG, your favorite person, Marjorie Taylor Greene, saying that they are controlling the weather. You better get your girl MTG.
They're controlling the weather.
She's so anti-Semitic and hateful, right? Because that is a trope, a stereotype around Jewish people specifically. And she likes to.
I didn't even think that, but you're right.
It is, yeah. And she loves her anti-Semitic tweets and her conspiracy theories that are rooted in anti-Semitism on top of racism, obviously, as well. Yeah.
And homophobia and
Yeah.
misogyny.
Girl, all the things. Yeah.
But the thing that's so disturbing is that disinformation works. So, right, the idea of creating a narrative around the administration's response to natural disasters, right, that the response wasn't adequate, that people were stranded, whatever, that there was another storm coming that wasn't even coming. What is to get people either not to vote, and think about the places where those storms hit the hardest.
Mm-hmm.
North Carolina and Florida, right?
Exactly.
So they have an incentive to prevent people from getting to the polls.
Exactly. And it's also scary because of the ways in which disinformation can incite violence.
Mm-hmm. Talk about that.
So just specifically, I mean, a FEMA worker was attacked because this person was believing all of the lies about an inadequate response that just very simply was not happening. FEMA had to shut down actual places where it was providing response out of fear for their employees. This isn't just about our beliefs anymore. This is actually having real life, like it's inciting violence. Also, let's just kind of take a couple steps back. Remember the whole QAnon conspiracy theory and how that person drove hours and showed up at the pizza spot in DC with a gun,
thinking that Hillary Clinton was abusing children
and also eating them. He said that they needed the blood of children. That's what that man said, and that's one of the core tenets of Q and the QAnon conspiracy theorists, believers. And he said that they had children in the basement. And everybody said, hey, there's no basement. There ain't a basement there. And he said, that's why the conspiracy theory, that's why it's true, because the basement is hidden. And this is where it also gets very scary, because there's nothing you can say to disprove it. Because when you try, then it becomes, well, that's just, well, you're just believing the lie. And they're just hiding. It's always a they. They're just hiding the truth.
There's also something just so sad to me about this, because the folks that are most vulnerable to believing the lies are also the sickest among us as a society, who we haven't taken care of well.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I have like I have so much fear and compassion and fear, because it's like, this is a group of people who are not well, who are spending too much time on the internet, and might not have a robust, I mean, I'm not making it like, are learning things and from chat boards and whatever. Who are the people who are going to be most vulnerable to being influenced by that? Are people who may just not be centered.
And I also think don't have robust in-person lives.
Right, like
That's what I'm hearing you
interpersonal
say.
lives.
Exactly. A lot of, I think, the prime targets for this, although it goes far beyond, and we can talk about that as well, it's starting with people who are consuming a lot of online media. And I definitely think the pandemic made that even worse, because people were sitting at home. And this is what people actually track about the rise of QAnon. It was that, it went from the black web and these platforms that were foreign owned, by the way. So this is where the disinformation comes into play, because they knew it was a lie, but they kept like starting conversations about it on these chat boards because they wanted to bring people to their platform. So it starts there, but then some sort of way, you're a suburban mom in Milwaukee and you click something that says stop child trafficking. And before you know it, you believe that Hillary Clinton is part of the Illuminati and is eating children. And it sounds so egregious, but that literally is how you're isolated. You are online, the world is shut down. And they don't start there. It's not the first thing you see when you click. But over time, it just kind of wears you down until before you know it, you are part of a disinformation cipher. And it can be very difficult to get out. It's almost like what I have discovered, Margot, the more I have like read about this and I'm understanding it, it's almost a cult mentality that gets
It
started.
is.
And you have to be deprogrammed.
Yes, you have to be deprogrammed.
So I thought about our episode with India Oxenberg.
And it's very sad. Like leaving a cult, or like getting clean, right? Because you have a robust, engaged community around a particular issue. So you're not incentivized to question it.
Yeah. And on top of that, that community is like, we know something. We know the thing that don't nobody else know, girl. It's us. We know the thing. We have this supreme knowledge. And that also gets me to talk a bit about the disinformation that has been very specifically targeted in the Black influencer space. And so folks who follow me on social media know that I did a reel that did my best to try to recount the facts that came from this study by a group called the Onyx Impact. The leader or the founder, her name is Isosa Osa. What she's been able to uncover and to really study around Black online spaces, I haven't seen anybody else doing this work. And speaking about the people who feel like they have the knowledge that nobody else has, she called out various areas where this is happening in our community. So I just want to list some of them for folks, if you don't mind, because this is for me really important. She talks about anti-vaxxers, which I know I saw a lot of talk around, right? These people who are kind of part of the Black wellness space. Although what I've noticed is that very few, if any of them, are actually credentialed, but they're the ones who told us to like drink chlorophyll during the pandemic to fight it off, and like all of these natural things that really had no connection to a global pandemic and a heinous virus. Gender wars and the Black manosphere. And we've had a whole episode about that here. And during that episode, I was attempting to make the connection that she makes plain in the report. There are a myriad of gateway influencers, the Breakfast Club, Stephen A. Smith's podcast, the Joe Budden podcast, that people are entering the front door and then getting deeper and deeper because of the algorithms, like the For You page that you just mentioned. Then we have the far right media outlets and how they are becoming more and more mainstream. So, like the Breakfast Club and others platforming Candace Owens, which is mind boggling to me. Anti-immigration talk, they love that. They love anti-LGBTQ rhetoric. I mean, really, just in some ways, I told my cousin one day, I said, have you been watching Fox News? And looking back, no, she had been part of this Black online disinformation space. And also, we know the foreign actors are definitely at play there as well. If someone is going to say, well, is it just because you disagree? Does that make it disinformation? And no, Margot, we know that's not true. It's not about us disagreeing. It's about this information being planted for a specific purpose.
I have also seen it. So some kind of adjacent spaces, but in the wellness space. It takes just like one or two steps, and all of a sudden I'm listening to a podcast where people are not saying the FDA because they don't agree with the FDA.
Wow.
Or you can't say cancer because if you say something around cancer, then you're and it's like, oh wait, what am I, what? Like, and you and I like have this angle where we're interested to see what other people are saying, so we are listening, but we also question. And
we try to.
And I think the rhetoric and the targeting of like the Black manosphere, for example, is so obvious. It's not that we disagree. It's that it's also anti-self-interest.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's anti-self-interest to stoke division within your own community. Like these are people who you claim you want to partner with, yet you are condemning them, right? And also we know that much of that analysis is not original to the Black manosphere. This had already begun in white spaces.
Correct.
And so someone drank that Kool-Aid, or worse, we were targeted, and then it was a domino effect.
Correct. There's also something that we haven't specifically talked about, and we should, and this idea that and you might roll your eyes at me, but like men are not doing well.
No, I don't disagree with that.
And many feel left behind.
Yeah. I mean, I've heard it from many Black men, especially. Yes.
But I've also heard it from many white men.
Yeah.
And so we can argue that, like, how is that possible in a patriarchal society? Of course, everything is meant for men. But whatever, that's how people feel. And those are people's experiences.
Amen.
And if we ignore them, then what did Michelle Obama say? That they're willing to make women collateral damage to their anger. Or something like that.
I mean, whether she said it or not, it's a profound statement. That's yeah.
Right. Like you're frustrated or annoyed or whatever, in debt, all of those things that are significant and you can't buy a home, you can't pay off your school loans, you can't get a job. All of those things are hugely impactful in someone's lives. And you are still willing to vote or not vote, like vote someone into office or not vote so someone gets into office who is willing to take away all the women in your lives' ability to get health care.
And by that, you're talking about MAGA Republicans and their disdain for reproductive justice and freedoms and bodily autonomy.
Correct.
Yeah.
And they've made it quite clear what they're going to do.
Clear. You know what I also think, though, to that point, I think there's also a rise because our men are not doing well in some ways. This is their thought, that it creates a rise of apathy. Just completely apathetic, right? Well, That's not me. I can't get pregnant, so why should I care? No one's gonna.
We can't get pregnant.
Exactly.
I think that reasoning is so misaligned. What about your daughters or your nieces or your cousins or your aunties or your students or your mentees or your baby sisters?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. But it also goes back to why the division is so important, why the manosphere is so important, because what it has done is created or substantiated these age old narratives about women being promiscuous, women making poor choices, women not wanting a good guy. So why should I care about her? She got herself pregnant. She knew her baby daddy wasn't worth nothing. Right? So this moment requires us to not see our reflection. This
Mm.
moment requires us to be hyper focused on ourselves and ourselves only. Because if not, how could we ever think that a Trump Vance administration is truly going to be what's best for our communities? It's transphobic, homophobic, sexist, misogynistic, anti-immigrant, xenophobic.
Racist, anti-Semitic.
Those are all things that really build the strong community values right there. No,
Anti-small business, anti-government, anti-democracy. I mean,
anti-kid, it's going to eradicate the DOE. Yeah, no, you have to care about you and you, like you as a vessel walking through the world, not your kids, not your grandmama, not your mama, not your. You have to just care about you, because if you care about others, you could not in any way want to do anything, whether that is voting or not voting or voting third party, in my opinion, to see a MAGA Republican presidency come to power. Like why? If you truly care about the world, I don't see it in any other way.
and we all need to take stock of what is influencing us and why.
And it has made me also start to unfollow people who even are saying things that I agree with. And so I just want to like end on a note of how we can combat this in our personal lives, right?
Talk about
Be-
that.
well, because what I realize is I'm getting so riled up. I'm not sleeping. I'm on edge. I'm shadow boxing with people who I don't even know about what I would say to them in the comments. Well, this person is wrong, because I don't even know these people. Like I'm online. This person online is incorrect. Like I'm like Kermit the Frog. How is that going to change where we are today?
This is what they want. This is what they want. They want everyone to get into a tailspin in their own echo chambers
You better preach this.
and do something stupid,
You better preach this.
right? And so, like, it's interesting that, sorry, I know we wanted to end there, but you just brought up something that is so interesting to me. So, um, you you mentioned the Breakfast Club and Charlamagne de God, right? Who has a very large following
He does.
of both men and women and everything in between, right? And he interviewed Kamala Harris a couple weeks ago,
Yes.
which was like this big thing. And there was a whole profile of him in the New Yorker, um,
Oh, wow.
talking about how he was receiving death threats for interviewing her and how that was probably like a fraction of what she receives.
Mm-hmm.
And that the rhetoric around the black vote going for Trump or not voting for Kamala because of Gaza, in his mind, is overblown.
Mm.
And again, I'm like, why are we listening to him?
I don't know, because I don't think that that's true at all. That's not what's coming down my timeline.
But it's like, what's coming down your timeline? I think where he is right is what is coming down your timeline, Shy, might not be a reflection of the of
I see what you're
everyone
saying. I
who's
see what you're saying.
voting.
I see what you're
But
saying.
it's certainly a reflection of some people.
Yeah.
And how do we distinguish? That's where sorry, I probably wasn't clear, but like, how do we distinguish that experience, the real experience you and I are having? We're seeing all these people who are not voting or voting third party or
For sure.
sitting out or you know, um, because of different very important issues. And how does that group reflect the greater country?
But I
And
think I was gonna say I also hear you, yes, friend. And I also hear you saying again why he got a microphone. I don't like is he a political pundit all of a sudden? I want to see someone, especially during this time, with such a huge platform, say things that are better informed. And when you were speaking solely from your individual experience, understand from a journalistic lens how to separate those two things. And he has simply not been trained to do so. I mean, Wendy Williams was his mentor. He's not been trained to do so. Yet, because of the times we're in, someone like him all of a sudden is pasted all across CNN, which is so confusing to me, especially understanding the way in which the Breakfast Club has been a gateway influencer for so much dis and misinformation. Platforming Umar Johnson of all people, Candace Owens, so many others, so much of like their health talk is rooted in lies and conspiracy. It's just, and I
I
don't
think he's
mean this
backpedaling. I think he's terrified
terrified of what?
that
Of
he
what?
created a lot of this.
Oh, I see. So he's trying to like right his wrong. People get to grow. I don't make outside of I know that there have been some essay claims against him that I've heard
Oh,
before. Um,
really?
yeah, people do get to grow. I don't know where that is, so I don't want to speak on it specifically. I know that he did take a turn and he has apologized to certain people that he's drugged in the past. He's talked a lot about going through therapy. All these things are great. They're wonderful. But what I'm saying is it gets to a point where some people just do not possess the credentials to shepherd the audience that they have. And you have to wonder why he is being given this platform over and over again. And Blackness is not a monolith. Very simply, it is not. And Charlamagne the God don't speak for me. Never did, never will. And so, back to this idea of who are we following? What are we consuming? I'm shutting off my devices and off the TV because I don't want to play around with the possibility of indoctrination. For someone like me who has existed in a high control group, like I mentioned to you, I am so sensitive to going back there again. And I also want to recognize as much as I can condemn other people for being victims of, or not condemn them individually, but I can see others, attacks, how they've been attacked around disinformation and targeted. I'm wondering, how have I also been a target of this? And in order to be able to have a clear conscience and I guess do some work, Margot, right, to be able to kind of like literally clean the lenses of my glasses, I've got to step away, even as an online creator. But what
Yeah.
about you?
So I am also walking a very fine line. I, in retrospect, was deeply unwell in 2016, 2017,
Yeah.
2018. Just total terror and fear um, around everything, around the Muslim ban, around the wall, around reproductive justice, around everything. I just every day I'd wake up and be like the world is ending, the world is ending, the world is
Yeah.
ending, and I just am really committed to not living that way. And I don't want to live out of a framework of fear, even though I can also acknowledge the world is on fire. And I don't know if that's me fogging up my glasses again. Like you're cleaning them up. Maybe I'm fogging them. I can receive that feedback.
No, I mean, what it sounds like is that you are remaining hopeful.
I am remaining cautiously optimistic.
And we also got to fight. And
And it doesn't stop. Like no matter who wins, the fight is just beginning for both presidents. It's
absolutely.
just a different orientation. It would be way worse in my mind in our mind if Trump wins. Way worse
Way worse.
for everyone.
I mean, we're fighting for survival at that point, right? I have a real fear about being able to marry my partner next year. So
Or
yes,
be safe holding her hand.
fears for my trans brother in a very real way.
Right.
In the short term.
In the
About
short
what
term.
that would look like. Exactly. Because of the political cover that administration would give it. But we have said time and time again how a Kamala Harris presidency is not going to be utopia. It is not going to be the antidote for every single societal ill that we experience. The fight continues. It's just under
Or
which
begins.
administration do we want to fight?
It begins anew.
Or it begins anew. Exactly. This is what we're up against, people. And I know for me, I cannot operate like you am from a place of fear. It is from an optimism that might be cautious, but I think what drives my activism is the belief that the world can and will be a better place. Because
Me too.
the minute we stop believing that, then what are we fighting for?
Exactly. And how are we living in it?
And how are we living in it? Because we do still have things in our everyday lives that bring us joy and to be hopeful around. And so I know today's episode has been a bit of a gut check for some of us, but we just had to get this out because so much of it we know is intentional and it's targeted to affect the 2024 election. And this is part of our election series. But we're not going to end here. We have another episode that's a lot brighter, I hope, Em.
Yeah.
All right. It's going to be a bit more of our hopes, some of our fears, but also what's next? What is next after November 5th?
Bye, friend.
We'll see you soon. Thanks for listening to justUS. We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you'd like to learn more about our podcast, be sure to check us out on our website at justuspodcast.com. You can also reach out to us there if you want to be featured on the show or if you have a business or a product that you think would be a good fit for our audience. Thanks again for listening.